The French Revolution was a very dangerous time for people across the nation, as a subsequent reign of terror that came with it resulted in the deaths of thousands. Each day in many French cities, people who were considered enemies of the revolution or in opposition to it were being brought to the scaffold, where a guillotine stood, and they were then swiftly executed. Following the execution of the French king and queen, the heads continued to roll across France. One of the most senior figures in the revolution also too lost his head. Georges Danton was referred to as a chief force in the overthrow of the French monarchy, but he also lost his life on the guillotine. Join us today to look at his execution, and remember to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. Georges Danton was the son of an attorney, and he was born on the 26th of October 1759. He attended a school in Champagne, and then from 1773 he was educated by the Oratorians at Troyes. He then studied for a law degree, and he went to the French capital of Paris to practice, and he then married Antoinette Charpentier. The couple lived in a spacious apartment and had 3 sons. The first would tragically die in infancy, being around 11 months old, when he passed away. Following the outbreak of the French Revolution, the promising lawyer then enrolled in the Civic Guard of the Cordeliers district, and he was then months later elected the president of the area. In spring 1790 he founded the popular group which was known as the Cordeliers Club. But he was at the time just a local celebrity, but it would not be long before he became a national figure. Danton was elected a member of the Provisional Paris Commune, or the City Council, in January 1790, but was excluded for a number of months. He had no influence really at the time, but the Cordeliers Club was a group that championed universal male suffrage, and it was on the lookout for men who were abusing power. It would be involved in the arrest of the leadership, and was later involved in challenging Robespierre. Danton was a key figure in the club, and he was also part of the Jacobin Club, and he made speeches in front of their members. But as Louis XVI tried to flee France in June 1791, Georges Danton became a leading figure in the revolution. He did not sign the petition demanding that Louis abdicated, and during the repression of some revolutionaries by the National Guard, he hid in London. But it wouldn't be long before Danton returned to Paris, and he was then in December 1791 elected the second assistant to the public prosecutor of Paris. In spring 1792 he resumed his role representing the revolution, and he began to attack other people in power, including the Marquis de Lafayette, who was an advisor to the king. He remained in the background as people demonstrated at the royal palace, and it's believed that this time he did not have too much involvement in the overthrow of the monarchy. However, he spoke before the Revolutionary Tribunal, and he claimed he had been responsible for many events, but it was more the collective efforts of the people than Danton's work. He did play a small part in removing the king, and he was elected the Ministry of Justice. He dominated other lawyers in this group, and was able with his revolutionary ideas to make quick decisions. Danton did encounter some problems with other revolutionaries, as he would object to moving the government from Paris to Blois, but then Verdun was besieged, and the people raided prisons looking for traitors. Danton then spoke in the Legislative Assembly saying, "To conquer the enemies of the fatherland, we need daring, more daring, daring now and always, and France is saved." At the time Danton was speaking, the prison massacres began, and he was charged with the responsibility of these. It's not known whether the massacres were organised by him, but Georges Danton did not stop the massacres of people suspected of being traitors. He was then elected deputy for Paris to the National Convention, and he made every effort to end the disputes between different revolutionary parties. He took no part in the start of King Louis XVI's trial, as he was sent to Belgium on a mission, but he was present and voted for the king's death and execution. But it was later claimed he wanted to spare the king. He had plotted to see if the English government would intervene, but after the failing of this he then voted for the death of the king. Danton then remained a figure of the revolution, and he then became a member of the First Committee of Public Safety. For around 3 months he was serving as the head of the government, and he dealt with foreign affairs and army matters. But his political work was not always clear, and he reappeared from time to time, claiming to be the voice of the masses. But he became a leader of the Indulgence, a moderate faction. He did not intervene to criticise the new government policies, but he did disapprove of the reign of terror and the repression across France. He then allegedly withdrew from political life because of his health, or for his family as he was worried for them, but he later returned within weeks, and he resumed his political work. He was determined to save his friends who were arrested or were in danger of being arrested, but his moderate line remained, and some of his friends along with him as time went on began to become more critical of the system of terror used by Robespierre and the policies of the revolutionary government. Because of this, Georges Danton began to attract suspicion, and other groups sought to dig their claws in. The government did not want moderates to overwhelm it, and Danton knew that one day he would be brought to trial. In the evening of the 30th of March 1794, he was arrested. On the 2nd of April his trial began, and he was charged with conspiracy and also theft, corruption and a financial scandal. Those who followed Danton were considered false patriots by Robespierre, and Danton was on his own. At trial he made a severe amount of commotion, and he was sent to the guillotine. The jury had only 7 members, and during the trial he made violent attacks on Robespierre, and the court's president struggled to control the proceedings. The defendants, however, were then taken from the courtroom before the guilty verdict came, and the death sentence was passed. They then had their heads shaved and cut, ready to prepare for the guillotine. Georges Danton was executed on the 5th of April 1794. He was one of 15 people to be beheaded in the same group as him, and this included many others being found guilty of being an enemy of the revolution. His execution took place in Paris, and it was said Danton was the first to climb into the first of 3 carts which were to take the group to the Place de la Révolution. He had to wait until all 3 carts were loaded so they could go to the execution together. The loading took over an hour because Camille Desmoulins struggled a long time with the executioner and knocked him down twice. He refused to have his hands tied or his hair cut, and they say the gendarmes had to help the executioner overcome Camille's resistance. During this time, Danton was laughing in the cart and nodding to the other condemned men, who were now bound and placed in their carts, to show that he was being kept waiting too long. He chatted to Lacroix and Hérault, who were next to him, saying within the hearing of the people, besides the carriages near to the palace courtyard rails, "What annoys me the most is that I am going to die 6 weeks before Robespierre." Eventually Camille appeared in the cart. His shirt was in ribbons, he was out of breath, frenzied, loudly cursing Robespierre and the Committee of Public Safety, and the infamous tribunal which served these monsters. The condemned went to their deaths in the midst of the huge crowd of Republicans, who were there to watch the original founders of their republic lose their heads. Seeing the procession pass, a woman in the Rue Saint Honore looked at Danton and exclaimed, "How ugly he is!" He smiled at her and said, "There's no point in telling me that now, I shan't be ugly much longer." His face did in fact look like the head of a lion, while Robespierre is like that of a cat or a tiger. When they reached the place of execution, they were made to get out of the carts at the foot of the scaffold. They climbed up one by one to be executed, and watched as the others died under the blade. Danton was the last. When he saw the executioner coming for him at the foot of the scaffold, he cried out in a strong voice, "My turn now," and quickly climbed the fatal ladder. As they were tying him to the block, he looked calmly at the blade, dripping with his friend's blood, and bent his head saying, "It's only a sabre cut." Danton is dead, Robespierre triumphant. The tiger has beaten the lion, but the triumph will not last. If we can believe Danton's prediction on his way to the scaffold, and he was a man who understood revolutions. Georges Danton was a leading figure in the French Revolution, but like many of those who went against the terror and the severe ideas of Robespierre, he made his way to the guillotine and lost his head. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.